because they are, as we have in our state, they are the chief commander executive of the military. So that is who can call for a war. What has happened is, in the Muslim world, a lot of people have lost all hope for decent governance, and they have good beef and a reason to be angry that there has been systemic oppression and corruption in the Muslim countries for decades. Unfortunately, as can be easily proven by a good research at your local library, the United States government supported those dictators for a long time. You can see lots of pictures with Donald Rumsfeld and so on and so forth, shaking the hands of Saddam Hussein, smiling, while he tortures and gasses his people, right? Well, because there's economic interests. We are not a moral country, we're a capitalist country. And capitalism puts money at the top. And so other things, it's why we're a very good relationship with Saudi, while the vast majority of Americans would say we don't like their values. But because of the economic interests that they have, those are our allies. You see what I'm saying? So it gets deep when you go on this rabbit hole. And so basically, these people who are misguided, heretical jihadists, they think they're fighting for a just cause. Somebody has brought them some sort of evidence that there's oppression coming from these dictators. For example, when our government left Iraq, and they left a guy who was very partial to the Iranian movement in charge of a country that was pretty much ruled by a Sunni, even though he was a very secular, Ba'athist, communist-style guy. So that guy, Maliki, the one that we left in charge of the country, was systemically oppressing the Sunni population for a long time. And those people were those people were calling out to people that were saying we shouldn't pull out, right? And so basically, these people built a cause. They said, well, Maliki, this governor, is very against us people, and he's causing oppression and murder, and there's militias that he brought from Iran that do all kind of sick things to us, right? So let's fight. Who's gonna fight for the Ba'athist party? Raise your hand. Nobody raised their hand, because that's Saddam Hussein. So then they get together, and most of the leaders of ISIS military are former Republican Guard of Saddam Hussein. They're using Islam because it's a way to get people to fight and die. Those people have no knowledge or practice of the religion. Those people are using religion to try to get unfortunate young men and women with their sophisticated marketing technologies by using a couple of correct points. There are some correct points as to the oppression that they believe they're fighting. How do you fight that? And what is the priorities? They're completely mistaken on that, right? And so that's my humble, small, you can go and research that on your own, and you'll find that I'm not speaking from opinion, these are the facts. God willing. God knows best.
Thank you, Imam. Can you tell the Imam was raised in Oklahoma, he used horse early in his thing, and now he used beef?
I'd like to add to that for just a moment, if I may. Again, I'm not a scholar, but I do try to be well-read, and I'm always very careful about the sources of information that I take seriously. I am reading a new book by a gentleman named William McCants. He is a senior fellow with the Brookings Institution and an Islamic scholar. The book is called ISIS Apocalypse. It is easy to understand because, as you all know, the situation in the Middle East is extremely complex. But this book is very easy to understand. It is about the origins of ISIS, their attempt to create the caliphate, their holy war, their jihad. And when you read this book and you begin to understand what ISIS is, you understand that ISIS is not Islam. So if you are interested, it's a very good book, again, that I would recommend, ISIS Apocalypse. And it's new, so you should be able to find it pretty easily.
Thank you. There's a gentleman who just was very concerned to the answer. Did you want to say something, sir?
Yes, in response to the question about jihad, you said that when jihad is taken to the military, the extreme military position, it must be turned over to the head of state. You said that.
Yes.
Where does Islam separate church and state, please?
Yes, here's a question about church and state in the Islamic law. It is a fact that an ideal Islamic state would be a theocracy. It would be, the politics of the country would be heavily intertwined with the morals and the values found in the Quran. We showed many of them up there. One of them, two of them are right there, right? And so we could go on and on and on about how that's not a threatening thing. So when you look in the rightly guided caliphate, the real caliphate that existed for 30 years, and then some shades of it happened over the next 12 centuries. But for 30 years, it was pretty, as far as the whole law was pretty well understood and practiced right. Umar ibn Khattab, one of the second caliph, there were many circumstances in which he removed people from posts of authority, in which he retracted judges from their position because they allowed their power and their ego to get to them, and they made decisions that were not in the best interest. I'll give you one very famous example in which, in Egypt, one of the companions and seen as one of the most wise elders of the companions of the Prophet, and was from the Quraysh and was an enemy to Islam long, and then he ended up kind of like Paul to become a very devout follower. His name's Amr ibn al-As. His son was in Egypt, the son of the governor of Egypt under the caliphate. He was racing in a foot race with a very fast Coptic young man. And this Coptic young man left him in the dust 4 or 5 times in a row, and then the son of Amr al-As began to mock him. And he said, I am the son of the noble governor of Egypt. I am Muslim and you are Christian. And he used these statements. And so this man, under that caliphate, knew he could send a message to the caliph, Omar, and tell him what just happened. Omar's response was, bring the Christian man, bring Amr, my appointed governor, and his son here to Medina, in the capital. He brought them all, and then Omar, peace be upon, may God be pleased with him, he said that he has looked into it and he found the evidence. And he said, the evidence is clear that you were beating this man and mocking him because you're so noble and your dad is so noble and that you're Muslim and he's Christian. And he said, yeah, well, he was trying to mock me that he beat me in a race. Omar told him, you should beat him in a race so that you have the upper hand. Other than that, he gave the dara, which is like, it's not a whip, it's like that long. He gave this thing to the Christian. He said, here, Udrib ibn al-Akramin, hit this guy who is the son of the most noble, the son of the governor, that he said so. And then he did. He hit him, and he said, I'm going to hit you as many times as you hit me, and he hit him with the thing. And so he's now humiliated. Then he said, now hit his dad. What kind of a Muslim would raise his son to act in this way as a leader appointed by a just caliphate in front of? This is the type of stuff that when you study our history, you will see that what happened to other traditions as a mainstay, it did happen, but there is an example to look up to that would be ideal. Unfortunately, that example has not existed, which is why many modern scholars would say we need to just function, and this is my humble assessment, that Muslim countries and the Muslim world should not be aspiring to a caliphate. We should be aspiring to have good moral people with qualification in understanding the politics and the economy, and they are moral people with upright character that follow Islam properly, and they have the balance of the true Islam, that those people would be elected into office, which is the way when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed away, he didn't appoint anybody. Actually, they had debates. And so Abu Bakr said, and then Omar said, Abu Ubayd ibn Jarrah said, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah said, and they were all discussing. After a whole day of hours of debate, everybody gave their allegiance to Abu Bakr as the leader of the political realm after he happened to be given that position because of his character, closeness to the Prophet, and knowledge of the religion and its comprehensive teachings. So I see very clearly when I look at Saudi and Afghanistan and Somalia, and now with these characters, that where we're at as a people, as a nation of Muslims, it is the absolute wrong priority for someone to think we're going to bring some theocracy and call it a caliphate at this point in time. This is not a priority in my humble assessment. Some other scholars would say, yeah, we should, and then we should make sure those type of people who misunderstand the religion should not be the leaders. But I think there is a lack, I will say there is a level of ignorance right now in the Muslim world because of the socioeconomic, socio-political realities that they're raised in, where dictatorships suppress the people in large numbers. That's why you saw the Arab Spring. Unfortunately, when we had Tea Party and when we had the Occupy Wall Street, we didn't have a government order to send snipers to the top and snipe out 10, 20 people at every rally. That happened in Egypt and Syria, right? These things happen. People watch people fall down with their protest, stand up for their rights, and then until now, we have people in our government in the highest form supporting Egypt, right? With all due respect to your personal opinions about that, you can see exactly what happened on YouTube videos. So thank you very much
Thank you.
for that.
Reverend, and this just because it has to do fear, first of all, put aside, but it does send some fear amongst American Muslims. And the questions say, should Muslims fear Israel and the United States, and especially when you hear rhetoric such as political leaders that are trying to get in office?
In my work as an interim minister, I limit myself mostly, until just recently, to serving churches that are very fearful that their congregation is about to die, or that they have made a terrible mistake in recent years and fear permeates everything that they do from that point on. And so I see what it does to a people institutionally and culturally when fear is the overriding emotion that causes decisions to be dreadfully disruptive and to cause further tailspins down into the oblivion of a church dying. That's the context out of which I work in the whole matter of fear. Anxiety is a given. It will always be there at one level or another. The heroic people among us who know how to moderate that tendency, that fight or flight aspect of the brain's working down in the lower stem. Some people call it the reptilian brain, where you don't really think, you just act, you fight, or you go into flight. Running away, or building walls, or segregating people into limited space ruins the human condition. There is no way that we can hold down anybody and keep them from rising up along with the rest of us without our also having to go down on one knee in the ditch or the gutter. I don't hear a lot of the rhetoric that lends itself to rising above the reptilian brain. I am a registered Republican. I have not had comfort in being able to vote for one for quite some time. Largely due to the fact that I find the party that I was raised to believe in has the wrong symbol. Not an elephant, but a lizard would do. There are exceptions, but I find it amazing that the party of Lincoln, the party of Eisenhower, of Teddy Roosevelt, would sink so low as it has, but then all human institutions are self-destructive ultimately. That's as much as I dare say.
I think the question was about U.S.-Israel alliance.
Essentially, Muslims fear with what's going on in the people coming in power. If they do come in power, should the Muslims fear the United States and Israel?
If I could...
And I should add, to complete my response, thank you, I got it straight. Men do that, you know. If we fear anyone, we lose self-respect and respect for them. Should you fear Israel or the United States? Not if you want to win a place in America. Trust.
Thank you.
I second that.
I would simply like to add that I think over the past several years, United States leaders have moved a little more toward diplomacy than we had seen in the past. And I think some of those diplomatic efforts are paying off. As you know, Netanyahu some time ago went to President Obama and said, we're allies, U.S. and Israel are allies. If we attack Iran, will you come in and support us? Obama said no. And the diplomatic solution to de-escalate Iran's nuclear abilities has been so far effective. So it's my hope that rather than looking toward world alliances, which as any student of world politics knows, rather than looking at the history of world alliances, we look toward diplomacy, and diplomacy which is geared toward peace, rather than staking claims on alliances that sometimes may get us into wars which we don't necessarily believe in. So hopefully diplomacy is taking us in a different direction.
Thank you. I have just don't much time, just two more for questions. Please excuse me and forgive me from now. There are some other questions I will not be able to get to. What does Islam say about a person exiting the religion?
So this is a very misrepresented concept in the Islamic law. As we saw a couple of verses, that there is no compulsion in religion, and say the truth from your Lord. Whoever wills, let them believe. Whoever wills, let them
can't hear you.
Okay. So we quoted a couple of verses in the Quran that one of them states there can be no compulsion in religion, chapter 2, verses 256. Let there be no compulsion in religion. Then we have a verse in the 18th chapter, verse 29, I believe. It says, say the truth from your Lord. Whoever wills, let them believe. Whoever wills, let them disbelieve. So the Quran has really, there is zero place in the Quran that has some sort of a ruling against someone who would choose to disbelieve. In the Hadith tradition, you do have a tradition which seems to inspire a ruling based upon the concept of treason, a ruling as such. And I'll explain the context. If some guy lives in Saudi Arabia, and this person decides after their own personal human research, I think Islam is false. I don't believe in Islam. My question would be, why would you want to stay living in not only a Muslim society, but a very rigid, strict Islamic law Muslim society if you don't believe in Islam? Why would you want to do that, right? So, but if they choose to, they have family or whatever there, who would know that they're a disbeliever if in their mind and in their daily life they choose not to pray, they don't fast, they don't do whatever? Who would be able to define that that person's not a Muslim? Nobody. It's something in their mind. It's a belief, right? Because there are many people in Saudi who we don't know what they are in their heart, but they don't pray and they don't follow anything. I was told when I went to my pilgrimage in Mecca by a scholar. He said, there are people who live in Mecca that live in houses right there up on the hill, and they've never been into the holy mosque once, and they don't care to. And I was like, what? How could that be? Be like a Christian living in Jerusalem and never going to the Church of the Nativity or the Church of the Resurrection. But those exist. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So they live there. I found out that there is a website called ladiniyun.com. Those people who don't believe in religion. And its source is somewhere in Saudi Arabia, right? And I probably don't blame some of them because of the unfortunate circumstances they have faced at the hands of religious people. And so the concept of why the text would give the idea and why it's translated and passed in some of the law books from the Hadith, not from the Quran, and it seems to kind of disagree with the Quran, is really based upon someone who lives in a theocracy in which they were known as a Muslim, that they consciously as an adult were saying, I'm Muslim. And so the whole society's laws are based on Islamic law. Now, in Islamic law, by consensus without a question, if you live in an Islamic society and you're a Christian or a Jew or even a Hindu, Muslims ruled India for 7 centuries with a caliphate. And there's 1 billion Hindus. What does that tell you? Islam does not call for the death of the infidels, because the polytheist would be the first one that would be killed. Right? There are 44 million Christian Arabs from the Coptics and the Maronites and so forth in Egypt, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and elsewhere. Catholics and so forth. They speak Arabic. They've been Christian for centuries, from before the Prophet Muhammad. Islam did not teach that. If you say, I want to be part, and they have thrived. Jews have thrived for centuries. When the Crusades happened, Jews went and built strongholds and fought with Muslims against the Crusaders. In Morocco, in Spain, in Iraq, and so forth. So to live as someone who has said, I'm a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or whatever, under a caliphate, there's absolutely no problem with that. The question comes, somebody's been saying, I'm Muslim, and they've made an adult conscious decision about their relationship with a theocracy. So the scholars assessed this statement. They said, well, it's because if they go out now campaigning, I don't follow Islam, I'm no longer a Muslim, I don't want to, and the law of the land, I'll give you one example in our history. It's not a pure analogy, but I think the honest, objective listener who remembers back in the 40s and 50s will probably understand what I'm saying. This is a capitalist society, capitalist democracy, right? Well, really it's a republic, but we always say it's a democracy, right? But this capitalist republic, there were people who said, we're for communism. Anybody remember that? Communism. Some of those people, we didn't hear from them again. What do you think happened to them? Treason, right? Those people are traitors to our country. They're against, and there were government policies, and FBI was out against these people. As a matter of fact, Martin Luther King Jr. was on the FBI's #1 list. Poor guy was just trying to get freedom. Nelson Mandela was seen as a terrorist on the United States FBI for decades, until people caught up and realized that our financial relationship and our capitalist identity to the South African apartheid is immoral and not American. At that which point, they supported Mandela as he became the president. So there are things that don't make sense to many people in many governmental policies. But surely the text that does refer to the death of someone is about them publicly in a theocracy of Islam. So by consensus of Muslim scholars, I've met many apostates, just like I've met many people who chose to become Muslim, and because this country is a great place, I'm able to sit here and talk about what I'm talking about, right? And I'm very thankful for that, right? But there are people who choose not to become Muslim. They choose not to be Muslim for whatever reason. It would be a crime and an act of very severe, crime and sin if some guy said, I've read this hadith, and so now I'm going to go attack that person. Here's the point. There's supposedly between 5 and 7 million Muslims in America. Some of them are very rigid and strict. Some of them, right? Most of them, because they've lived in America, they have a sense of balance that helps them from their American identity, that helps them rationalize their religion in a good way. But there are, I will go out on a limb and say, thousands of people who left Islam openly. I'm not Muslim. Right? How many of those did you ever hear were killed by a Muslim? I don't know of any. Please inform me if you have a reference for that. So if that is understood, which it's not in Islamic law, in our society, so I hope I've done some justice to the question to help. Is it? Fair enough? I tried my best.
Thank you. And this is the last question. It has to do something with art, maybe that you have the answer. I have heard that Islam does not allow images of people in art. And this is why Islamic art has such strong tradition of beautiful geometric patterns. Is this true? And if so, why?
So I'm going to get in trouble here with some people. But I have to say what I'm convinced with. And this is a thing where Muslims, Christians, atheists, Americans, and so forth, all of us, we need to come to terms with the fact that human perception is an ultimate reality. Every individual has come to terms with what they're convinced with as a person. We cannot force somebody to see it our way. We cannot dogmatically control people. I mean, unless we have media. If I could control media, I'd make you all think like me. You see? You see my point? But that's a whole other point. So, but in general, everybody has their position. So on this subject, there are 3 or 4 hadith. It's not in the Quran, but there are 3 or 4 well-established hadith about the prohibition of drawing live beings. And the hadith basically indicates that God will question somebody on the day of judgment, put a soul into that being, right? So it's like so an artist who's drawing physical beings of life, humans and animals, that they're somehow competing with God, right? And in some of them, it is connected to polytheism, because the term taswir is the word that's used. In that time, that word also used to mean to sculpt a statue, right? So making statues or graven images, which I'm pretty sure, you know, there's some Orthodox Jewish quality on this as well, that you're not supposed to do that, right? Well, I read some Maliki jurists, which is one of our 4 authentic schools of thought, that were from Spain. And they were thriving in Muslim Spain, which was a Muslim land for 8 centuries until the Spanish Inquisition, in which the Pope called for the absolute destruction and obliteration of anything Muslim and any remnants thereof. Basically, in Muslim Spain, the scholars said, we believe those texts to be related to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be with him, that the society in which he was engaging was heavily prone to polytheistic tendencies of worshiping idols and graven images. And so since that was a potential threat to the monotheism of people, then those prohibitions were there. He said, now we're in Spain. And in Spain we have Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and we don't really know of any more pagans that are existing in us, in our society. And so we don't see a big deal. So you'll find many scholars from Turkey and from elsewhere, from Spain, from Baghdad, in our history, in the golden ages of our history, who saw no problem with drawing human beings and so forth. So for me, there is also an authentic tradition in which the wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when she was a young girl, it says that she used to play with a Pegasus, right? And then some of her friends, they had this Pegasus and she kept it. And then one day she showed the Prophet, she said, this is this toy that I used to play with. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he did not prohibit it or anything. But it's a horse that was sculpted with wings on it. So it would be a sculpture. And so even in Saudi Arabia, you'll have a large swath of scholars that said, for kids, you can make cartoons and draw live beings all you want because of that hadith. But for adults, let's be strict and rigid about it, right? And they're saying because we don't think the kids will start doing polytheistic things. I would say adults aren't either, now in the very evolved intellectual world we live in, where we realize, with all due respect to idol worshippers, I don't know if we have many of those here in Kansas, but you know, that's mostly people don't worship statues anymore. So I would not see a problem with people who draw images of human beings, because there is a precedent and a scholarly opinion and perception that would respect that. I will go ahead and put this point out there. It is very important for Muslims in general to endeavor upon the arts, production of movies, writing of books of scripture, fiction and nonfiction, making cartoons, making artist work and music and things that can present our identity to the popular culture. Because I remember a very point that when Joe Biden famously came out and put President Obama in a very tough circumstance, and he was being interviewed about his position on gay marriage. And he said, look, you know, if I'm not mistaken, I remember it like this. He said, look, you know, people used to have this idea about black people, and they had the Cosby Show, and it was a normal black family, and they were wealthy, and they talked and act very similar to everyone else. So through watching that show, the whole Cosby issue aside, the courts will deal with all of that evidence, that we started to accept black people as normal. He said, now we've been watching Will and Grace for some years now, and seeing this, you know, funny gay guy, and seeing him as a normal person, got everybody to accept him as a normal part of our culture. So if Muslims would be properly portrayed, unfortunately, they are absolutely the oppositely portrayed by people who have an agenda to portray them that way. And this idea that it's all haram to have anything to do with this, that is very counterproductive, and there's a strong legal argument that scholars even in Saudi Arabia like Sanad al-Auda, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayy, and others have come out highly advising, as what I'm advising, that the Muslims not force their children, either your doctor or engineer, or taking over the family business, because these are the three options they get. Or you're gonna be a woman married to so-and-so, right? This needs to stop, because everybody has the right to choose what they have passion for, and some of them have passion for being involved in media, or journalism, or politics, or drama, or whatever it may be, that they can go out and do something they really have passion about, and give a great representation as a fully integrated community. The Jewish community, when they first appeared in America, were treated as absolute enemies and a disease and a parasite of the state. That's how they were treated. This is United States history, no question about it. Irish, same way. Catholic, same way. This is our history. But the Jewish people were very adamant about getting involved and incorporated and excelling to their best capacity in every single thing. The best comedians, Jewish. Best, you know, producers, Jewish. They know what they're doing. They're establishing themselves as a respected contributor to all aspects of society, right? Muslims have to understand that that is a blueprint precedent that we should look at as a minority in this country and embrace the evidence of what will happen if we do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In closing, I would like to thank all of the, first we did send some special invitations to certain people in the society and community. One is the Wichita Police Department, our great neighbor. Tom, would you put your hand up? Neighbor, that's our neighbor church. We thank you very much for taking care of our society next to yours over there. Councilwoman Williams, she was here earlier today. Captain Easter, I don't know if that's the terminology they still use when he took over as Sedgwick County Sheriff. It's Sheriff Easter now, right? So Sheriff Easter was supposed to be here. I don't know if he made it. He said he'll be here for a few, and he didn't. We thank them all. We thank you, especially for coming out, taking time. This is a long event, 3 hours out of a Saturday of family life, but it shows that you care as a society, as a community, Wichita City at large. And especially would like to thank, these events don't happen without the work of volunteers and the volunteers of Islamic Society of Wichita. And we don't appreciate them enough, whether being on the Board of Administration, Board of Communication, as well as Muslim Student Association. They jumped in to help here with WSU. I want to thank Wichita State University Student Involvement Section, Media Resources. The microphone is great. And finally, these speakers here that come today, very, very courageous to be coming and talking about such an issue of a hot topic, and would like to give them a round of applause. And I hopefully we'll have something like this again in the short future, in the near future, because this really should have been full. This auditorium should have really been full if we want to accomplish something and share this message and be as all one American productive group. And on your behalf, I'd like to give these gifts to our speakers and give them a final round of applause. and I'm sure if anybody wants to speak to any of them, you're more than welcome. That leaves us 15 minutes of the auditorium reserved. Thank you very much for coming today.